Before we delve into some of the fine-grained specifics about the types of validity, I want to present the broad picture of what's going on with research, specifically when we are attempting to make a causal link from one construct to the other. As in this case, just as an example, we're going to go with anxiety is going to directly impact performance on a complex task. And let's say theoretically that we care about this either in the organizational context where we have jobs that are difficult on people and produce anxiety, but we still want them to perform well, so we're going to create an intervention that will buffer this link. Or let's say we're working in a school and we care about student anxiety and their learning. So in psychology, the common way that we depict relationships is we have circles representing constructs, and we have squares representing the operationalization of that construct. And that just means that we have something that is theoretical, hypothetical entity, and that's why we call it a construct, is because we can't directly observe it. We're constructing it in our minds. We assume it exists. And then we have to think of a way to capture that underlying construct using a survey, or maybe we're going to manipulate it, in a lab or something like that. So let's take this first section up here where we have the two circles connected by this one directional arrow. And in psychology, when we have that one directional arrow, that means we're assuming or proposing that the causality is flowing in that direction, that anxiety is directly changing this DV, in this case, the performance. And so different factors impact that arrow. For example, we could have confounds that, are mimicking anxiety's effects. It's not really anxiety that's doing it, but something else. And so that would weaken this arrow, for example. Random assignment strengthens this arrow. You probably have already heard some of these arguments, the factors that strengthen internal validity. Again, that's the truthfulness of inference, that we have a causation there. Now let's move to the construct validity factor. Construct validity is depicted by this arrow that connects the unobserved, we can't observe it directly, thing that we care about, something like, again, self-regulation maybe. I'm just giving some examples. Depression, well-being, all of those things are considered constructs, and we want to make them real by operationalizing them in some way. So we can either ask people on a survey to self-report their anxiety. We can have an objective person rate people's signs of anxiety. We could also manipulate it because it's the causal construct, or the IV, the proposed cause. We can induce anxiety in some people and not others, and then compare the two groups on performance. So those are different ways that we could do that. And the arrow runs this way because we assume that the way participants respond to any measure of anxiety is going to flow directly from the essence of that construct. And the extent to which the way that we're capturing it or manipulating it naps onto that theoretical essence of whatever we define that to be, then we have strong construct validity. Okay, so that tightness of correspondence is represented by this arrow. Now let's move over to this side. The DV side, same thing. Maybe we could operationalize performance by having an objective rater rate people's performance. We could give the person a math test and see how they perform. We could give them an intelligence test to see how they perform. We can maybe do a video game of some kind that's complex, and that'd be more fun for the participants, some of them, right? They would play the game, and then we would rate their score on that. Now, I like the video game example because it introduces a factor that's important to think about, and that is the extent to which we are measuring things other than performance or other than anxiety. So the extent to which we're capturing things in our measure or manipulation that is not tied specifically to the essence of what this is, that impacts construct validity in a negative way. So with the video game example, what if we are capturing not only the performance on the task, but we're also capturing someone's proficiency with video games? So people who've played them before and are very familiar with, I'm sorry, I bumped the mic here. They're very familiar with and used to playing those games. Then how is that going to, I'm sorry, we're capturing another thing. We're capturing proficiency with video games that we wouldn't be capturing if we operationalized it in another way, such as the Raven's Matrices test. That's an intelligence test where you have to, it's like a visual spatial test where you have to manipulate shapes in your mind. And it's really cognitively taxing. And so some people would be more taxed than others on a video game. Those who are more video game novices would be definitely at a disadvantage. And so if that's the case, then our operationalization it captures a contaminant, we call it, and it's something in addition to what the theoretical essence of that construct is, and so it could weaken this link in that case. With anxiety, there are different ways we could manipulate it, going back here to the cause. We could have participants come to the lab and we could tell them in the anxiety-producing group that they would have to prepare a 10-minute speech on a given topic to present to an audience of 100 people or something like that. And research indicates that most Americans, at least, are very fearful of public speaking, and so we would expect that it would produce anxiety. We could also be less ethical and threaten participants that they would be shocked at random intervals or something, so everybody would always be on edge in that group as to when they would be shocked with painful, a painful shock, but it wouldn't be harmful to their health, supposedly. And that was done a lot in social psychology in past decades. I think less so now because it's just talk about research ethics violations. But anyway, so I'm just giving you a couple ways we could manipulate anxiety. And the one with public speaking is a good one, I would say, probably for 90% of us who don't enjoy public speaking and who maybe are novices at it. But this link would be weakened to the extent that we would have people in that group who are very outgoing and enjoy performing in front of people. So there is that small percentage, probably smaller percentage of the population who enjoys being in front of people, and it would not make them anxious at all to present to a big group of people. So to the extent that we have those people in the group, we would have a correspondence that would be less. Now, this is also potentially an external validity matter as well, because external validity is the truthfulness of the inference that we would have a causal relationship that we find in our study that extends across different kinds of people, across different kinds of contexts, the lab versus the field, things like that. So the extent to which this causal relationship that we observe is observable across different kinds of other variables that we would have. Again, operationalization types. Does this finding extend across different kinds of operationalizations of the same construct? And that's kind of what we're getting at with some people love public speaking and others don't. And so if we had chosen a different way to operationalize anxiety, or manipulate it, I should say in this case, then those people who love public speaking, we would induce anxiety in them as well. Maybe the shock, fear of being shocked would cause them anxiety as well. So that's a boundary condition. We call that these factors that impact external validity specifically, we call them boundary conditions. And so when you're writing up your study and you find the effect you were looking for, you would want to note in the limitation section or your discussion section somewhere the extent to which you expect these findings extend to other kinds of people, other kinds of situations, things like that. And those are depicted right here. When we think about the link between our operationalizations, do we expect that there are things that would weaken this link versus strengthen it? So maybe this relationship holds for some kinds of people but not others. There's another factor I was just thinking about, that if the task, back to the video game example kind of, if this task is very familiar and easy for some people, then we would expect that a little anxiety would actually enhance their performance, not inhibit it. And if you're a novice at this task, any little bit of anxiety is going to produce probably deficits in this. And so that's a boundary condition. We would expect that people who are highly proficient at a task, a little anxiety helps them, whereas people who don't know how to do this task at all, it's very unfamiliar, even the tiniest bit of anxiety would cause them to perform less well. So that's just one example, another example, I should say, of a boundary condition that you could have. All right, so I hope that that's helpful in seeing the broad picture, and of course we'll get into specifics as we go along.